Will Oldham began his lengthy solo career in 1993 under the multi-faceted Palace moniker. Initially formed as an alt-country persona joined by a backing band, he released his debut album, There Is No One What Will Take Care of You, the same year, under the name Palace Brothers. He was backed mostly by the members of then-dissolved Kentucky rock band Slint. Oldham had shot the album cover for the band's iconic and influential 1991 album, Spiderland. As he was quickly gaining traction as a newcomer to the Drag City label, soon home to acts like Silver Jews and Flying Saucer Attack, as well as having spots on John Peel's radio show and holding small shows and tours, he holed up in a friend's apartment for a part of the year and spent much of his time there writing new songs for the next Palace Brothers album. Intended as a lush, grandiose follow-up to There Is No One, his second album was recorded in a barren state, lo-fi, and obviously recorded at home. At first release as a self-titled album, Days in the Wake has become one of Will Oldham's most iconic records, providing a unique, intimate experience that Oldham would not recreate under the Palace moniker ever again. Today, we're going to take a look at it. Hey guys and gals, sorry that it's been a while. I don't really have any excuses for my hiatus here. I must just chalk it up to pure laziness and disinterest in making videos for a while. That being said, however, I would like to preface this here by saying that I have always taken YouTube as a hobby, and that I upload when I'm feeling inspired to make a video. I will have some end-of-year videos summarizing my 2019 up in a few weeks, hopefully towards the middle or end of January, as well as a couple special reviews that I want to get out of the way as well. A lot has happened since most of us last met here. I've heard a lot of new music, I've started college, and I've also maybe gotten a tad addicted to RateYourMusic.com. Maybe. Well, one of my favorite recent discoveries here would be today's album in question, Days in the Wake by Palace Brothers, released August 30th, 1994. And to say that this is a favorite would be an understatement. The thing I love about having musical friends, and using Rate Your Music especially, is that you're able to find a lot of underappreciated things, a lot of things that miss the public mark, or a lot of things that never had much attention at all. I would put Days in the Wake under all three of these categories. While Will Oldham has received his much-deserved praise for albums like I See a Darkness under his longest-running Bonnie Prince Billy name, I feel as though this diamond in the rough deserves far more attention than it's already been given. After all, it's one of maybe a handful of albums in 2019 that impacted me so deeply that I put them on my Topsters chart with no hesitation. Days in the Wake, however, is unique in my personal experience in that it was not only immediate, but also demanded repeated re-listens from me in only 2 days. I first listened to the album on October 1st, 2019, and by October 3rd, I had heard the album 4 times already. I never do this. When an album does something like this to me, I can tell that it's going to be a favorite of mine for a long time. But enough sappy talk before the review. Let's actually talk about the album itself. Days in the Wake is, as I mentioned previously, a rather unique entry in the Palace music canon, as the rest of Will's releases under the name were group efforts, surrounded by well-engineered guitars, piano, and drums. And you can perhaps hear this best on the album's follow-up, 1995's brilliant Viva Las Blues, produced by Steve Albini of all people. On the flip side, Days in the Wake is recorded entirely by Oldham on a 4-track tape recorder, using a slightly out-of-tune acoustic guitar, and occasionally he is joined by his siblings on songs like Come Little Dog and I Send My Love to You. His voice quavers throughout the entire record, and voice cracks and flat deliveries, maybe not so much the latter thing, are the norm here, which for me only enhances the emotional capability of this album. Opening with one of my favorite songs ever, undoubtedly. You Will Miss Me When I Burn is a haunting number tinged with Oldham's common injections of religion in his music, signifying whether or not the people who know him now would really miss him when he inevitably goes to hell, but for what reason is unknown. This song, man, this song has some really haunting lyrics. Will you miss me when I burn, and will you close the other's eyes? It would be such a favor if you would blind them. I guess if there's a refrain it would be this line, which is equally as soul-crushing, which actually opens the album. When you have no one can hurt you. The song seems to be one of Oldham's most revered, and for good reason, thankfully. However, I have come to know this stripped-back version so well that even the live versions of the song, in which it is usually expanded and given a band treatment, don't stack up to the greatness that is presented on this album. While we're talking about this, I figure I kind of want to gloss over the compositions on this album in general. They're relatively straightforward, a lot of simple chords with somewhat strange strumming patterns. I've always said that this album sounds like Nick Drake if Pink Moon was an album by Jandek, but even this is far more normal than anything I've heard by Jandek. God, why did I ever make that comparison? I could go through every song here, and you know what, that's what I'll do. I don't usually do that for album reviews, even for many of my all-time favorites, but the album is short enough, just under 27 minutes in fact, and with enough for me to say about most of the songs, I think I can do it. I'll go through my absolute favorite tracks first, since I already covered You Will Miss Me, which is my absolute favorite. Track 4, the beautiful I Send My Love to You, is a strained number with 2 guitar parts, the other played by Paul Oldham, who I believe is actually Will's brother. This is one of the more vivid songs on the album, and one of the most effective for sure. Here's an excerpt of a verse that I'd like to share with you all very quickly. The moon is falling, my wounds are calling, my head is bleeding, and I am a duck. The lake is cracking, it hears me quacking. Those lyrics are some of the best on the entire album for me, and the song is unfortunately too short, as are many of the songs present here, such as my next favorite, All Is Grace, at just over 1:30. If there's any song on this album that could be fun, it's this one, which is weird, seeing as how I consider this album incredibly bleak, but yeah. Yet again another vivid song. Will invites the listener, or perhaps an unknown character, to have a drink with him as he explains some interesting things, like how he shot a deer. I don't know, it's weird for me to articulate this song, and many of the songs actually, because the lyrics are fluid in terms of storytelling, but the actual meanings of them I haven't deciphered. I'm unfortunately offering a very basic look at how deep some of these songs could go. To wrap up my top favorites, we have the closing track, I Am A Cinematographer. The song is rather fitting as a closer, as it feels like a wrap-up of a story that we somehow already know as listeners. Will sings of walking away from California and New York, from everything that was good and everything that shone, which I've taken as turning away from the temptations of fame, but not settling for the absolute bare minimum. In this same song, Will closes the album on a lyrical couplet that strikes me every time. If you were alone, you could walk away from Louisville. What exactly he means here isn't something I've found yet. Who is he speaking to? Why do they have to be alone? What is there to walk away from in Louisville? Will Oldham continues to make me ask questions even as the album comes to a close, and I admire that completely. This kind of thing allows for subjectivity in an album's plot and an album's closing, and that is something that I always appreciate. But we're not done yet. I would like to gloss over the rest of the album and then give my little anecdotal piece, yada yada review score time, you get the idea. No more time wasted. Pushkin, Milnes, and No More Workhorse Blues are 3 concisely written songs, at least lyrically. All 3 tell stories that unfold over the course of the track, especially in the latter No More Workhorse Blues. According to Drag City themselves, the track was recorded during a thunderstorm at Will's other brother, Ned Oldham's house, where Will also recorded Come a Little Dog with his sister and Ned himself. If there were one song for me to pick on here that is the most dramatically performed, with the most energy and power, it would be this one. After we begin the song with hushed vocals and hushed guitars, with an audible cracks of thunder in the background, Will breaks into a loudly strummed ending where he is no more a workhorse, but a racing horse, a grazing horse, your favorite horse. It's such an incredible moment on the album for me, and one that certainly blew me away on first listen. A couple other songs worth noting are the much aforementioned Come a Little Dog and Thou Without Partner. And Come a Little Dog is a rather dark yet humorous song involving Oldham and his siblings making barking noises and singing about cats and dogs, living and dead. That's why it's kinda dark. Thou Without Partner is actually the longest song on the album, and it's a sorrowful number that seems to be about divorce, containing some of Oldham's best lyricism on the entire album. Depending on my mood at the time, this track can either be incredibly worthwhile to my experience, or detrimental. Sometimes I will count the seconds before its 4-minute runtime comes to a close. But I guess that's what happens when my head, when I'm used to 1.5 to 3 minute songs for the entire album. Now, for just a little personal anecdote, I'd like to just drop this in here. I sat on the recommendation I received from a friend to listen to this album for about 6 months, until I listened to it on the way to college one day. I remember sitting on the campus transport, since I go to a community college with 2 campuses, listening to this album and just staring ahead at the seat in front of me until this album ended. From the opening seconds of You Will Miss Me When I Burn to the final strummed chord of I Am A Cinematographer, my attention was undivided and I was starstruck. I may have found my tried and true favorite discovery of the year at this point. The album shot to my top 10 almost immediately, and I listened to the album 2 more times in that day alone. I was in sheer disbelief. Now, to quickly wrap things up, I know I kind of glossed over a lot of those things, but I don't really know how else to articulate these things. Days in the Wake is, so far, my favorite album out of any of Will Oldham's projects, even though I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. At first I was disappointed that this album is so unique in the Palace music discography. I wasn't interested in the alt-country flavorings of the other albums at first, but I'm going to love them and appreciate them for their own merits, and cherishing Days in the Wake as a diamond in the rough of an undeniably expansive, quote-unquote, underground discography. I can't help myself, but I recommend this album to anyone watching. It's only 27 minutes, it's rather accessible by its standards, and, in my opinion, it is one of the most overlooked and underappreciated albums of 1994, of the 1990s as a whole, and of all time. As of the time I'm recording this video, Days in the Wake is sitting at number 7 on my top 50 albums of all time. With that, I give Palace Brothers' Days in the Wake a 10 out of 10.